In this work, we present a framework for automatically generating step-by-step tutorials to teach procedural knowledge in interactive learning environments. In contrast to systems that require the designer to hand-author tutorials for every example problem, we automatically generate tutorials for any problem that can be solved with a given procedure. Consider an application for teaching grid-based math problems like addition, subtraction, or long division. We can write the procedure for solving subtraction, for example, as a program composed of loops, conditionals, assignment statements, and function calls. Our framework generates step-by-step demonstrations of this procedure for a given example problem by mapping programming language constructs to visual and textual explanations in the user interface. Assignment statements are explained by highlighting the visual representation of the stored object. Conditional statements are explained by phrasing the Boolean expression as a question that references associated variables. This framework allows us to generate step-by-step demonstrations for any problem that can be solved with a defined procedure. Furthermore, given the mappings between programming language elements and interface elements, we can generate explanations for any procedure that can be applied to the application. Here, we have entered a new procedure for Euclid's algorithm to find the greatest common factor of two integers. Because this procedure can be applied in the same application interface, our tutorials are generated automatically, without any additional authoring effort. Our framework can scale to teach more complex procedures that require a combination of spatial and mathematical reasoning. In this example, we show how the framework can be applied to the popular educational game Refraction. The goal of the game is to use pieces to split and bend a laser to correctly satisfy target spaceships. This procedure for refraction can solve thousands of distinct levels. However, the entire procedure should not be explained for simple introductory levels like this one. We are able to introduce information only as it is needed by explaining only the lines of code that are executed for a given problem. In this example, we do not explain splitting because it has not been introduced yet. In this more complex level, our framework automatically adds an explanation of the splitting procedure. As the player masters sub-procedures in refraction, like this backtracking procedure to decide where to place the next piece, it is no longer necessary to explain them in detail. Our framework can summarize sub-procedures naturally. To create a summary, the tutorial designer writes a header comment that explains the sub-procedure and marks the lines of code that should be visually explained in the summary. From this information, we automatically generate a summary explanation, like this one for the backtracking procedure. As shown so far, our framework can generate step-by-step demonstrations of a procedure for a given example problem. It can also create more interactive learning experiences. One effective method of supporting students as they work through practice problems is by providing feedback when they make mistakes. Our framework can be used to generate this feedback automatically. In this refraction level, we trace the learner's progress and compare each action made in the user interface to the correct action expected by the procedure. If the learner deviates from the expected procedure, we can respond by explaining the steps that should be followed to produce the correct action. Another challenge is that tutorials typically transition abruptly from demonstrating the steps needed to solve a problem to expecting the learner to solve the problem independently. Recently, educators have suggested that this transition can be smoothed by asking the learner to solve only some parts of the problem, while demonstrating other parts. This is called a fading worked example. Our framework naturally supports the authoring of fading worked examples. For example, in this problem, the entire subtraction procedure is demonstrated. Once the learner has mastered simple problems like this one, we can focus on teaching more complex concepts like borrowing. Here we fast forward through the procedure to subtract in the first column, because it does not require borrowing. Then we explain the borrowing procedure in detail, and ask the learner to perform only the last step in the procedure, which is to enter the correct digit in the result cell. We can gradually increase the number of steps completed independently until borrowing has been mastered. Here, the learner solves the entire subtraction procedure without help. We ran a user study with 28 fifth grade students to evaluate whether our generated tutorials can effectively teach Euclid's algorithm for finding the greatest common factor of two numbers. We found that two versions of our system, one with just-in-time feedback and one with fading worked examples, produced learning gains that were roughly equivalent to those of a traditional lesson with a human teacher. We also asked 3 educational technologists to write algorithms for subtraction. Here are some examples of tutorials that were produced from their algorithms. They are all slightly different. which shows the flexibility of our system to support various approaches to teaching a procedure.